In this video, I'll take you through 4 different mobility drills to start opening up some freedom of movement in your pelvis. These drills are designed to help bring some awareness to how your pelvis is sitting in your body and how that relates to any low back pain that you might be feeling. So we're going to start with some forward and backward tilt of the pelvis. So imagine that your pelvis is a bowl full of water and you're trying to spill water out the front and then out the back. So this is coming through an anterior and a posterior pelvic tilt. We'll come through about 10 to 15 reps of each of these mobility drills. And you might notice that as you continue through the repetitions, you might be able to open up a little bit more movement in either direction. You also might notice that one way is a little bit easier than the other. That's neither here nor there, it's just information for you to use as an assessment for yourself. Now we're going to move through the same thing, but side to side. So pelvis is a bowl of water, now we're spilling it out the right side and then out the left. This first drill can be made a little bit easier by putting some bend in your knees. That'll give your hamstrings a little bit of slack and help you to move your pelvis a little bit more. So standing tilts are your first mobility drill. Next we'll be moving down to a low lunge. So one knee down and one foot out in front of you. Starting from a neutral pelvis and a 90-degree bend in both knees. You'll tilt the pelvis posteriorly, spilling water out the back, and lunge forward. Here you'll feel a little bit of a stretch on the front side of your back thigh. Come back through center. On an anterior tilt of the pelvis, spilling water out the front of the bowl and straighten the front leg. Come back to your neutral, tilt the pelvis back and lunge forward. Back through neutral, tilt the pelvis forward and sit back. So now you're opening up some freedom of movement with the pelvis and also noticing how that relates to your movement in general. So you can feel with your hands how your pelvis moves back and forth as you're moving through this low lunge. So we'll come through about 10 to 15 reps on either side. So we'll go ahead and switch to the other side there. So starting with that posterior pelvic tilt, spilling water out the back. Posterior tilt and lunge forward, big stretch on the front of the back thigh. Coming back through neutral, finding your anterior tilt and sitting backwards. Through neutral, tilt the pelvis back, you lunge forward. Tilt the pelvis forward, you sit back. Coming through about 10 to 15 reps of each of these. Again, you might notice that you're able to come a little bit farther on either side of the movement as you're coming through the drills. These drills are just designed to bring awareness and help you move with intention. Alright, once we've done about 10 to 15 reps on either side, we'll move to spinal rocks. Spinal rocks, we'll start seated. Sitting up nice and straight and tall and feeling both of your sits bones on the floor, the pokey parts at the bottom of your pelvis. So from your starting position, you'll tilt the pelvis back, posterior tilt, round through the low back, and then roll all along the length of your spine, however much is comfortable, and then come all the way back to that sitting up straight and tall position with both sits bones on the floor. Tuck the pelvis, round through the low back, roll along the length of your spine, and come back up to seated, back to both sits bones firmly grounded. We'll come through about 10 reps of these, making sure to reset with both sits bones on the floor in between each repetition, and mindfully tucking the pelvis, rolling along the length of the back. Again, moving with intention and feeling how the way that your hip bones move affects the way that your entire body feels. Once you've done about 10 to 15 reps, we'll move on to shin box hip drops. So starting in a shin box, it's a position that looks like this. You'll have the sole of one foot on the knee of the other foot that's bent back. So you're making a box with your two shins. Placement can be anywhere that feels comfortable. So you'll notice that when you get into a shin box, your back hip is going to want to lift up a little bit. Totally normal. The drill for shin box hip ground is going to be moving from that lifted hip position and then grounding that sits bone that's lifted as much as you can, and then coming back to a lifted hip. So you're moving from being grounded to being lifted about 10 to 15 times. This time we're working pelvic movement unilaterally or on one side. 10 to 15 reps. Working right to the point of tension, but never to the point of pain. So none of these drills should hurt necessarily. And then when you've done 10 to 15 reps, switch sides and come through the same thing, moving from that lifted hip position to 2 sits bones grounded on the floor. You might notice a difference between sides, also totally normal. It's just information for you to use. And about 10 to 15 reps on either side for those. So if low back pain is something that you've been experiencing, or even if it's not, these 4 drills can be really helpful in just thinking about how your pelvis moves, how that relates to the movement of your entire body. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.